Hello, this is Introduction to 3D Character Development in Autodesk Maya. I'm Jason Weiser, and in this video, we will use volume modeling to quickly rough out the major forms of our character so it can be tested in an animation or video game pipeline. We will use an orthographic diagram to create our character. I am going to use this one of Amelia Earhart, and in Maya, notice we have the front view all the way on the right and the left side of the character here in the middle. The legs are spread, the fingers are spread, the character is symmetrical and upright. We put this reference into a project folder on our desktop. And then here in Maya, we spacebar our way to the front view here in the lower left corner. And in the front view menu, we choose Image Plane, Import Image, and then find our project folder and bring in our image. We hit W so we can move this plane up onto the center line. We want the feet on the center line, and we want the body centered. So the feet are on the horizontal line, the body is on the vertical center line. Spacebar our way to the perspective view, Alt right click to zoom, Alt left to orbit, and we drag back on the blue Z axis a couple of perspective grid units to move the plane behind the line. This is backwards on the blue Z-axis. Then here in the display menu that's at the bottom of the channel box, we click on Create a New Layer from the selection so we can hide our layer. If we just create a layer, we can right-click on the layer to add the selected object. And we click this empty box twice until we get R for frozen. Click away, and now we will not click our reference accidentally. Here in the poly modeling shelf, we create a cylinder, and this will be the torso for our character. Spacebar our way back to the front view, and we go to Show to turn off the grid, and we go to Shading to turn on X-ray. This allows us to see our image plane through our model. Back in the channel box here on the right, we find Inputs. You might have to scroll a bit. And then polycylinder to set our preferences. The radius of my character is about 1.5, and my height is about 5. For subdivision axis, we always want 8 sides, the minimum in order to get a round figure, and height 5 or 6. I'm going to use 6. The cylinder was automatically created in the center of the world at 0, 0, and we want the height of the cylinder to go from crotch to the bottom of the neck. So I can reduce the height to maybe 4.5 and reduce the radius to perhaps 1.3 to give us a good starting place. And now right-click, hold for the vertex component mode, and we're going to select rows of vertices in order to scale them uniformly to get her overall form. By hitting spacebar, so we can have multiple views visible at a time, we can see the effect of my scaling in the perspective view while I scale it here in the front view. I hit R for scale, and I do not want to click on the x-axis. Don't do this. If we do this to try to get the form, you can see how it only scales in one view, on one axis. Instead, scale by clicking on this central square and then hit W to move that row up. When you're moving, only move vertically. Do not move side to side. We want to maintain the center line. This first circle is the neck. The second one is for shoulders. The third one for armpits. The bottom one is for crotch, which we can make quite small, but please don't scale all the way down to a dot. Leave some space. Drag this down a little bit. Second from the bottom is the hips. It's where the legs will come out of. And then we have the waist. And this line is for the bottom of the chest. I'm going to go into my layer to select my reference and drag it over just a little bit so that the model is just a little bit more centered. And then refreeze. I should also name this layer Reference. Now that I have shaped the front view, I'm going to right-click and choose the Face component mode, select this entire side of the character's right side, and I'm selecting around just before I hit the center line and hit delete. Then right-click hold for object mode, and I'm going to duplicate an instance of this model to then rotate and shape on the side view of the character. Go to Edit, Duplicate Special, option box, and we choose Instance and then hit Duplicate Special. We know it worked because the shading got a little bit darker as we have two overlapped forms. Then we drag it out. Here in the channel box, we find Rotate Y and set it to -90 degrees, and then right-click hold for Vertex so that we can shape the form. Grabbing a couple vertices at a time, I want to make sure that the front and the back match the silhouette. Move this back for the pelvis, move this in for the butt. The crotch should be wider on the side view than in the front view, so I will non-uniform scale here on the blue z-axis, dragging sideways. The front is still kept small, the side is allowed to be bigger. The neck should be rotated, hit E for rotate, in order to get the angle that the head comes out of. And now that we have the basic form, we want to create shapes that the arms can come out of. We want somewhat rounded shapes. These should be six-sided. If we drag this vertex down, this six-sided form in between the shoulder and the armpit would be a good choice. Right-click hold for edge, select this line, and hit the backspace button. On a Macintosh, this is the delete key in order to return that line to a state of flux. This shape, this six-sided shape, is still made up of multiple triangles, but they are all in a flux, so that with face, we can select the whole thing. For the leg, we're going to use this bottom row from hip to crotch. We can remove this line, and then go to vertex to drag this a little bit higher, and this a little bit lower. If we spacebar our way back to the perspective view, and drag this central vertex down, we can more easily see the six-sided shape. In order to have four-sided shapes across the form, quads, we can also backspace away these two edges. And to make sure the leg has enough space to come out, we can move these lines outward, bring this up a little bit, and the arm can actually be quite a bit smaller. Move these lines to the side. And then for smooth edge loops, adjust these curves a little bit. Back in the front view, select these vertices, drag them up, put this vertex at the shoulder and this one at the armpit, and bring the neck down a little bit. And now we have the basic torso ready for extruding arms and legs. Back in the perspective view, right-click hold for face, and select the arm shape, and go to the Modeling Toolkit. We will be using only a few of the Modeling Toolkit tools for this lesson: Extrude, Connect, and Target Weld being the main three. Hitting Extrude, we could use the parameters available in the Extrude interface, or we could simply hit W to return to a Move tool and drag out the extruded detail. Back in the front view, hit R to non-uniform scale this form flat on the axis that is perpendicular to the line we want to make, and then scale uniformly to make it smaller in all directions. Hit W to move this to the wrist, and R again to shape it. In order to get an elbow, we can right-click for edge, select across these edges, and hit Connect. Then R to non-uniform scale this line flat. Spacebarring our way to the top view, we can then hit W to move this line back a little bit to get a bent elbow. Now for the leg, hit Face, Extrude, and W to pull out on these axes. Returning to the front view, we can rotate this down, hit R to flatten, and then W to drag this down to the bottom of the leg or the top of the ankle. Hit R to scale for the width of that ankle, and then right-click for edge, select across this form, and hit connect for a knee. Hit R to scale, and then going here to this side view, we can double-click this edge and drag it sideways and up a bit for the knee. The leg tends to be a little bit thicker in the side view than in the front. We can scale and non-uniform scale to get that form, and drag this ankle back a little bit, and we have the angle of the leg. It is worth noting that this method has a tendency to create a little bit of a dent here in the thigh, which we can fix by selecting these two vertices and dragging them inward a little bit, and these two to drag in order to create a more rounded leg. And now we have our basic arm and leg extruded. Next, we extrude the foot. Select this face at the bottom, hit extrude and W, and drag it down on the green Y-axis. We can now select the three faces in the front of that foot and hit extrude. Hit W to make sure that we are extruding evenly, and we pull this forward. We can hit R to scale it a little bit more flat, so it's smaller at the toe, drag it down a little bit, and then we make our fixes here in the side view. Go to Vertex, spacebar our way to the front view, and drag these vertices in. We can bring this down a little bit, and now we have the basic foot volume. Let's go to the hand. Most of the detail would be cut after the rough volumes are finished, but the fingers are going to get pretty detailed right here. First, for the end of the sleeve, I will do an extrude and hit R and scale it in a little bit and pull it out with W just a tiny amount. I'll then scale it a little bit flatter for the form of the hand. And now we will do 3 extrudes for the hand. 1 for the wrist, 1 for the palm where the thumb will be extruded out of the side, and 1 for the space between the thumb and the fingers. So for the first extrude, hit W, pull it out, hit R for scale, non-uniform scale sideways, and a little bit up. If we hit F, not only does the screen focus and center on the selected polygon, it also makes it the center of our orbit. Alt, left mouse to orbit, and makes it much easier to move around. Our second extrude, hitting W, will be for the distance of the palm, where the thumb will come out of the side. And now we can hit R to make this a little bit thinner. And then extrude again for the distance between the thumb and the fingers. And this can be much thinner and a little bit smaller this way as well. And then lift it up. Going to the front view, we can make sure these distances are what we want. Right-click hold for vertices to make our adjustments. Bring this up and scale it vertically for that palm. Until we have the form the way we want it. And now we can extrude all of the fingers. The thumb is ready to go. We hit extrude, hit R, scale a little bit smaller, and this is the shape that we're going to extrude the thumb from. Do an extrude, pull it out, hit R, scale smaller. We can drag this down a little bit, and then right-click hold for the edge component mode, select across these edges, and hit connect to draw a dividing line that will be the second joint of the thumb. There's a lot more we'll do with this later, but for now we have the basic thumb form. To prepare the fingers, we will first cut in the 4 shapes that the fingers will be extruded out of. Start by holding Vertex, to be able to select these 2 vertices and hit Connect to draw a line between them. Another way to select the component modes is up here at the top of the modeling toolkit, vertex, edge, and face. Select this edge, we can hit R and scale non-uniformly to make it flat. And this one flat, and this one flat. That way when we create new lines, they'll be flat as well. Select these two to hit connect, and these two to hit connect. And now we have 4 shapes, but we'd like to have space between them. I will use multicut to draw the tendons, also making quads, back from this point at the top of the hand and the wrist to the line we created for these fingers, and then again to this side. By hitting return after using multicut, it finishes the cut and prepares the next cut, so we don't have to keep hitting the multicut button. And now to create the space between the fingers, I can start the multicut at that vertex, down to the bottom, and the last one for the space between the ring finger and the pinky. And I can select this edge and drag it up to begin to imply the meat of the palm. Now before we can extrude these fingers, we want to adjust these shapes to make cleaner squares, but also to get the curve of the palm. We don't want this to look like the hand is resting on a table. We want to see the full meat of the palm. So the pinky should be brought down, the ring finger down a little bit as well to create a curve this way. And from the top view, we also want to create a curve so the fingers can come out in a spread fashion. Only the middle finger should be pointed straight out. I can select each of these lines and non-uniform scale them flat. I can then hit W to pull these forms away and therefore create more square forms. I can also drag these up a little bit. Now selecting this face, I can drag this pinky down and this ring finger down a little bit as well. So we have a curve going from pinky to ring to middle to pointer. Going into the top view, I can hit E to rotate this finger that I selected in the perspective view. I can also hit 4 on the keyboard for see-through mode, wireframe, go to vertices, and just drag rows of vertices. So here is the pinky, which I'll pull back a little bit and angle away. Here is the ring finger, which comes forward a little bit. The middle finger forward and straight forward. And the pointer can come out a little bit. I'm going to drag all of these a little bit over to make more room for the thumb and make sure I have a nice curve from wrist to pinky. And now that I have a curve both from the side and from the top, I am ready to extrude out these fingers. If I go to object mode, either by right-click holding or by clicking on this button here in the Modeling Toolkit window, I can hit Command 1, which isolates my selection in this viewport. I select these faces, and I hit Extrude. Now if I click and drag here on the word thickness, I can pull these fingers out. And then each one individually can be scaled uniformly, so the ends of the fingers are a little bit smaller than the origin. I can adjust this pinky so that the fall off is not quite so dramatic. And this ring finger as well. And then here in the top view, I can pull back on the length of this finger and these two as well until I have something more like believable lengths for these fingers. Going to the front view, I can see that my middle finger now is about the length that I expected. And now I can right-click for edge and select across the edges of these fingers in order to do a connect for the joints. Before I hit W, while the connect is still active, I can go down to segments and increase this to 2 and hit return to have 2 evenly spaced lines. Then I can hit W and drag them up a little bit for a little bit of curve on those fingers, just a little bit, and maybe a tiny bit of scale as well. right-click hold for object mode, and the basic body form is complete. Select it. In the channel box, create a brand new display layer. Call this body. Hit return to finish the name and hit save. And then hide the layer with the body and spacebar our way back to the front view where we will create the head. This side view can also be hidden in body by selecting it, right-clicking on the body display layer, and hitting Add Selected Objects. Now here in the front view, we are going to trace the profile of our character face and head, ignoring the hair but imagining the full shape of the skull, using a tool called Create Polygon. We find it under Mesh Tools, Create Polygon, and we are going to use as few vertices as we can to get the full form. Most of it can be done in pairs of vertices. For example, we can do 2 vertices for the neck, and then 2 vertices for the chin, and then 2 vertices for the lower lip, and 2 vertices for the upper lip, 2 vertices for the bottom of the nose, and 2 for the top of the nose, 2 for the brow, and then 2 for the forehead. And then we will do 6 to 8 to trace around the skull, and then 1 more for the bottom of the neck before we hit return to complete the form. This skull is not yet big enough. We right-click for vertex, and we continue to adjust it by hitting W and moving 1 or more vertices at a time. We want to get the full form of the skull and to make it fairly rounded. Remembering that the skull from the side is a big oval with a sphere at the top, and the sphere ends around the ear. When we're done, we can go back to object mode and spacebar our way back to the front view. Hitting Command 1 brings back everything that was hidden when we hit Command 1 before. And we can see that the face is currently reversed. We're seeing black instead of gray. And the pivot is all the way here at the bottom. To quickly move the pivot to the center of the face, we go to Modify Center Pivot. We could also hit the letter D on the keyboard to be able to move it dynamically, and hit D to return to regular movement. And to reverse the normals of this face, to make the polygons face toward us, we can go to Mesh Display Reverse. It automatically selects the faces. We can right-click for Object Mode and click away, and now we just have this form with the pivot centered and the normals facing toward us. We once again want a duplicate, an instance, that we can position in the center of the face. We go to Edit, Duplicate Special. It remembers the instance from before, but we can check by clicking on the option box for the instance and Duplicate Special, and then drag this face over. And we can go to the Modeling Toolkit and spacebar our way to the front view. Alt middle mouse to pan. We want this face to be rotated to face toward us and centered as much as possible in her symmetrical head. We rotate 90 degrees on Y in the channel box, and here in the Modeling Toolkit, we drag this over until it is fairly centered. Now I'm going to have 2 views visible at once. I go to the Face Component mode by clicking on this button or right-click holding on the face. Select it with the left mouse and hit Extrude. We're going to use these parameters to extrude this form so that it is about this half width of the nose. If we pull this out, you can see here it gets much too long at 0.2. Let's try 0.1 and hit enter, and that's a pretty good distance. Now we will use offset to scale this form evenly in all directions. We don't want to actually hit R for scale because that wouldn't be even in all directions on a concave shape. Instead, we will try hitting 0.05 on the offset, and that's pretty good to give us a little bit of an angle all around this head to make it rounded. Let's try a little bit less, maybe 0.03. That's better. We hit W to commit the extrude. And now we want to extrude everything except for the width of the nose. Right-click hold for vertex, click on these two vertices, and hit connect. We can then drag this vertex a little bit forward so it's not overlapping. And now that the nose is cut off, we can right-click hold again for face to select all of the face except for the nose, and once again hit extrude. This time we want the thickness to be somewhere around the end of the mouth and the side of the neck. For me, that was 0.3. And the offset we can make 0.1. We might begin to get a little bit of overlap here in the chin. We'll fix that shortly. But this is a good angle for that next extrusion of the face. Hit W. We're going to right-click for vertices so that we can do a connect line to cut off the neck so that the next extrude won't extrude the neck. And we're also going to use target weld to close up the vertices of the mouth so that the next extrude will not continue the mouth, unless you're trying to create Batman's Joker. Going to target weld, making sure no other vertices are selected. We can target weld these vertices together by clicking one and dragging it to the other. And now I can take a moment and I can drag these vertices away from each other. I'm using the cardinal directions, the axes, to do this movement, so I don't accidentally move in a strange direction. We only really use this square in the orthographic views. These two vertices could be moved a little bit out for a slightly wider chin. But now we have a face shape here on the side of the head that is much simpler. We go to the face component mode, hit extrude, and this time we want the side of the head, and we can just hit R for scale, select it here in the perspective view, and scale it uniformly. And so now we have the basic volume of the head. We can delete the inside and the bottom. That would be interior geometry once it is attached to the rest of the form. And I'm going to add just one more line here for the center of the neck. Hit connect, set the segments back to 1, and hit return. And then hit W to pull this line out, thus helping to create a more rounded form. We can drag these neck forms sideways a little bit. There's plenty to do to extrude an ear and an eye and to make the face more rounded, but we will save that for the next tutorial. Now that we have the head form, we can spacebar our way to just a perspective view, and in the channel box down in the display menu, bring back our body. In object mode, we can move our head forward and then select the body so that in face mode we can delete what would be redundant geometry. It looks like at some point I accidentally target welded or otherwise messed up this part of the geometry. It looks like the solution is simply to move this edge back. If I had messed up the geometry, then I would want to delete it, and then I could use edge on these two sides in the modeling toolkit to do a bridge. Or if I had to delete both of these faces, then I can select this edge, hit extrude to drag out a single edge, and then bridge between these forms. Now I can select the body, shift-click on the head to add it, and hit combine to make them a single form. It didn't work because I still am in component mode. Right-click hold for object mode, select the body, shift-click on the head, and hit combine. The instance goes away because we have a new form. Right-click hold for vertex, and we can target weld these points, skipping the second one here in the neck, from the head to the body, skipping this one and there. You can see we're missing 2 points. We also have a very flat surface here that could use at least one more edge to make it more rounded. So selecting all of these edges, we can hit connect and W, drag this form forward a little bit, and then in vertex mode, select that vertex and target weld. Going to object mode, hitting Command 1 so that that plane is no longer in our way. Select this edge, double-click this edge. To select all the edges in between, hit Connect, W, drag it out. Right-click hold for a vertex, select this vertex, and target weld it to finish the neck. Finally, we select all the edges in the entire form and go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and then in the front view, hit D to move the pivot to the center of what would be the full form. And then we can go to Edit, Duplicate Special. We have to get out of the D mode first by hitting D again, out of the component mode. Edit, Duplicate Special to make the copy that we can rotate -90 degrees on Y. And to be able to see the full form, Edit, Duplicate Special, Option Box. We still want Instance, but now we're going to scale -1, which is -100%, essentially scaling all the way through the form. We choose the first box because they represent X, Y, and Z, even though they're not labeled. Duplicate, drag this in a tiny bit, and we can see her full rough form. These could be combined and then exported to test in an animation or game pipeline. But for now, please keep the two forms separate so we can continue to work on this half. Before we save and close, we want all of this history to be deleted. Edit, delete by type, history. File, save scene as. We put it in our project folder from before. Name the file with your name. Hit Save As, and then File, Set Project, and choose your folder. Hitting Set Project lets you create a default workspace.mel, hit Command 1, and now when you move this project to another computer, it will be able to find any images you've associated with it. And that is the tutorial of using volume modeling for roughing out a character form. In the next tutorial, we will start cutting details. Thanks for watching.